Well, hi, everyone. My name is David, and I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders here at Navvia. And it's my pleasure to take you through today's presentation of ITSM and financial services. I do have a long background in ITSM and a lot of experience in the financial services sector from an IT service management perspective. One of my earliest engagements was with the New York Stock Exchange. I've worked with the Bank of New York Mellon and a variety of large, complex financial services organizations. At Navvia, I'm also leading the digital transformation of our company from what was once an IT service management consultancy into a software product company, providing a tool for process design and documentation. I just want to give a little bit of background on our company before I get into the presentation. So we were actually, as I mentioned a moment ago, founded as an IT service management consultancy. So we do have deep roots in the IT service management space. And while doing that work, we thought there had to be a better way to improve the productivity and the effectiveness of our consultants. And that was the genesis for the Navvia Process Designer. So we created the Navvia Process Designer as a productivity tool for our consultants. And now we make that product available as a SaaS offering to our clients. We're no longer in the consulting business, but we're very focused on helping to make you more productive and effective. We do have a variety of customers within the financial services space, and this just represents some of those clients who are using the Navvia Process Designer. So just to frame today's discussion, I want to start by saying that financial services was one of the earliest adopters of information technology. As a matter of fact, one of the organizations where I did some consulting work, the Royal Bank, was actually the first Canadian bank to install a computer, an IBM 1401. And back in those days, man, these things occupied a full room. And fast forward many years, financial services really embraced technology, and today it's a core component. It's critical. Financial services organizations could not operate without being heavily vested in information technology. As a matter of fact, financial services spends more on information technology than most industry sectors. Looking at this graph, which was based on a report from Flexera. For those of you who don't know Flexera, they're one of the largest organizations that provide software and hardware asset management software. So they're very much interested in helping organizations manage their IT spend. In their 2021 State of Tech Spend report, they show that IT spend by industry, financial services is third on the list, just slightly behind tech hosting and software companies. And at 10%, they're more than double than some of the other industry sectors. So financial services spends a lot of money on IT. This graph just shows a subset of the financial services sector, the banking and securities sector. In 2021, it's estimated that they'll be spending $570 billion on information technology. So that's a significant amount of money. And you're seeing the growth in that sector through to 2025, where they'll be spending $715 billion. That's a significant increase. One last thing to put things in perspective, Gartner in October 2021 released their forecast of information technology spending worldwide. Now, these are for all enterprises, not just financial services. But you can see here in 2020, it's estimated to be around $3.8 trillion. And that's going to grow substantially into 2022 and beyond. So the point I'm trying to make here is financial services is heavily invested in information technology. Only the software sector spends more on IT than financial services. 570 billion USDs in the banking and security sector. And if you look at it overall, it's about 14% of the worldwide enterprise technology spend. So it's clear that financial services heavily invested. The question is, what's driving these expenditures? Where is this money going? So it's a bit of a balancing act, right? Because you have all of these competing requirements within the IT organization, to where this money needs to be allocated. And if you really looked at it at the highest level, it falls into two categories: maintaining the systems that exist today, and also innovating for the future. This is really where the bulk of the money is going. So let's take a look at the top priorities that CIOs have when it comes to their technology spend. So the top initiatives, and this is another graph from the Flexera State of Tech Spend report. By the way, the hyperlinks here in the presentation, which you'll be receiving, will take you directly to all of the source documents for the slides that I'm presenting today. So the top initiatives year over year. No surprise, digital transformation was at the top of the list. As a matter of fact, it's actually a little higher than it was in 2020. Cybersecurity, well, given the state of the world, cybersecurity is very important, and that was the second highest initiative from this report. Cloud migration, customer experience, cost savings, all big categories when it comes to where CIOs are allocating their spend. I also want to add that if you look at some of these categories, customer experience, cloud migration, some would argue that those are actually subsets of digital transformation. Digital transformation, moving legacy systems to the cloud, digital transformation to improve customer experience. So you could make the case that digital transformation is actually the largest category or the largest priority of CIOs for 2021. And I don't see this changing. Looking at the Financial Brand Digital Report on financial services spend, top of the list was improving digital experience for consumers. Again, very much in the category of digital transformation, changing their operating model, improving their systems to improve how customers interact with their services. Enhancing data analytic capabilities. Third on the list, reducing operating costs. So again, there's a trend there from two different reports showing that the reduction in operating cost is key. Improving an innovation culture, digitizing back office operations, so automating and improving the services that are delivered. So you can see here there's a lot of focus really on improving the end user customer experience, on improving the automation and the digitization of services, and moving legacy systems into the cloud. Looking at global spending on digital transformation, you can see here in 2022, it was estimated to be $1.8 trillion. But by the time we reach 2025, that will grow to $2.8 trillion. Again, this document has been sourced from IDC.com, a very large IT analysis firm. What I can say here is, just to summarize these points, digital transformation and digital experience are one of the key initiatives in IT organizations today, followed closely by cybersecurity, but also cloud migration, automation, and cost savings, many of which really falls under the digital transformation category. And just to recap, the global spending is just going to continue to increase through to 2025. And given the fact that financial services is one of the largest, they have the largest spend based on revenue of any other industry sector, you can see that as this growth continues, it'll only accelerate the amount of transformation and spending in the IT sector. So based on the last couple of slides, I was building a case to say that financial services does spend a lot of money on IT, and a lot of that money seems to be going to improving the experience that they provide to their customers through digital transformation, digital experience, migrating systems to the cloud. So let's make sure we're all on the same page here when it comes to digital transformation. So I have this definition from Gartner, which I really like. Digital transformation can refer to anything from IT modernization, for example, cloud computing, so moving legacy systems into the cloud, to digital optimization, so taking maybe manual processes and automating those processes to improve efficiency and reduce cost, to the invention of all new digital business models. The term is also widely used when you talk about things as putting services online or legacy modernization. So it's really the digitization of what you do. So digital transformation really is the digitization of your core services. And that is one of the big drivers of IT spend today, and that's going to continue well into the future. One thing I do want to caution people, though, is that 75% of these digital transformation initiatives will fail to meet the objectives. And this is based on a variety of research that I've done from the Boston Group, Capgemini, the Everest Group, McKinsey and Company, KPMG. So there's really this dichotomy. We're spending a whole lot of money on digital transformation, but we're not really seeing the results that we expected. We're actually, this is resulting in a lot of waste, a lot of thrashing, a lot of waste. It's really not the most efficient way to do things. So why do these initiatives fail? There's a variety of reasons, and they're all over. When you take a look at the reasons, I'm sure many of these will resonate with you. It could be anything from the culture of an organization and the resistance to change. It could be lack of executive sponsorship. Perhaps there's too many silos in an organization, and although we have an initiative to improve in one area, the rest of the organization is not on board. There can be unclear requirements. So when you're making the transformation, no one's done the hard work of going out and understanding, where are we today and where do we need to be tomorrow and how do we get there? That really ties back into things like processes, because process really is at the core of all transformation. Any service that you provide, there's an underlying process, an underlying workflow. And if you haven't got your processes defined, it's really, really difficult to create a path for your transformation. There could be no consensus on goals. There could be an outdated technology stack. There's a whole lot of reasons why these digital transformation initiatives fail. But many of these things can actually be can be addressed by a more systematic way through the application of IT service management principles. Before I go any further, I'm just curious, do any of these items here resonate with you folks, given where you are? So if you could just maybe provide some feedback or some comments. Do you see some of these issues within your organizations today? Do you see the drive toward digital transformation? And do you see some of these issues, getting in the way? Let's see, do we have any comments coming up? So looking at just some of the feedback we're getting, Karen, thank you for that. Absolutely. Yes, we do. Hi, this is Ken. I think we're seeing a lot of these things getting in the way. So I'm not surprised, right? Because many organizations that's one of the things, coming from a consulting background, I had the benefit or the fortune to have worked in many, many different organizations. And organizations are more alike than they are different. So I'm not surprised you're seeing these issues as well. So let's bring this back to the topic of today's discussion. Let's bring it back to the topic of today's discussion, which is IT service management. IT service management is fundamental to protecting an organization's investment in information technology. And this goes all the way back to the earliest days of IT. As a matter of fact, historically, IT service management came into being. For those of you who might not know, there was IBM created something called the Integrated Service Management Architecture. That was developed in the early days of information technology in order to improve the reliability of the machines they were producing. Machines were notoriously buggy back in the days. I mean, the technology wasn't like we had today. The operating systems were not as mature. The support processes didn't exist. So IBM realized that they had to do something to, people were spending a significant amount of money on these early machines, and they wanted to do something to ensure that these machines delivered on the promise. They were able to be reliable, resilient, and they were available. And that was the genesis of IT service management. If few years later, the British government took a look at what IBM was doing and then started codifying that into something that actually ultimately became the ITEL framework for service management. So just a little bit of history there. So the initial reason for being for ITSM was to improve availability, reliability, and resiliency of the machines that these organizations were running. But ITSM also positions an organization for digital transformation success, because there's a lot of core skills within the IT service management domain, within folks like yourselves, that are essential, I mean, critical to the success of a digital transformation initiative. So it's not only about supporting what you have, but ITSM allows you to sort of migrate or move to the future and bring out new systems, new ideas, new concepts, and to actually accelerate the implementation of those concepts through the practices of service management. So just to kind of frame the discussion, what is service management? Well, a lot of people, have this idea that service management is like ITEL, right? ITEL is service management. Well, I don't believe that ITEL is service management. Service management goes far beyond any one framework. Now, it's important to have agile and robust processes. I mean, organizations have had IT processes since there was IT. Frameworks like ITEL and integrated systems management architecture and others we're just trying to codify what were best practices at the time so that people could all benefit, from them. But, I really wonder, when people sort of say, well, ITEL says you should do it this way. And it's really not about that, right? ITEL is just a set of best practices that you need to tailor for your organization. A lot of people think, service management is a bit about technology and tools. Let me ask a quick question. I'm seeing a trend in the industry today for basically ITSM platform groups, people who are responsible for the tools and technology for the IT service management. Do any of you folks have is your organization sort of structured that way with an ITSM platform group? Just curious. Because what I am seeing is a lot of times when organizations are structured that way, there's too much emphasis on the tools. The technology and tools are incredibly important because they underpin the programs and services that you offer, but they're just a means to the end, right? And they're not the primary focus of IT service management. So while it's important to have tools, I think too many organizations tend to put far too much emphasis on the tools, forgetting the other elements of what really makes an effective service management program. So again, the processes are very important. The tools are very important. The other element is the ITSM professionals like yourselves. And unfortunately, in many organizations, there's a reliance on the IT professionals to do heroic acts. I was on a call a couple of weeks ago, we've been working with this one prospect, actually. They're not a client. We've been working with this one prospect. And it's interesting because you get a sense of an organization while you're working with them. And it was constant firefighting. Meetings were always canceled. People wouldn't show up, or they'd show up late and say, I'm sorry, there was a crisis this morning. And you begin to think, how could there be so many crises all the time? Why is there so much thrashing in that organization? Now, the work was getting done, but it was through the heroic acts of individuals as opposed to a systematic approach of service management. So we have this, this sort of framework of service management, which is really a combination of people, process, and technology. It's no one thing. It's those things in a nice holistic framework, an approach, if you will, for IT and the business to collaborate on the design, development, implementation, support, and ongoing improvement of the various business solutions that they implement. So I just want to caution people that when you take a look at service management, you have to take a broader look. It can't just be about the tools, or it can't just be about the processes, or it can't just be about the roles and responsibilities in the organization. It really has to be a combination of all those working in harmony to deliver on these results. So how do we leverage ITSM to support this transformation? So just backing up a second, we made a case that that financial services sector spends more on IT than virtually any other sector out there. We also showed that a lot of where that money is going is in innovation, digital transformation, customer experience. So we've got an organization called IT Service Management with the right skill sets, the fundamental skills that can really help accelerate or improve digital transformation. And I submit that it's you folks that have those skills. You've basically grown up in an environment where process was important. So whether you're building a process on how a change is implemented or how an incident is resolved, or if you're building a process to show how an order flows from a customer entry all the way to the fulfillment, process is process, and nobody understands process better than the folks in the ITSM organization. So ITSM pros have those critical skills, the skills to design processes, to capture requirements, and to implement automation solutions. We've been doing that for years and years and years. So that's a very positive thing. And I think it's something your organizations can really leverage when it comes to digital transformation initiatives. Another thing that ITSM folks are very, very good at is really this whole concept of human-centered design. When organizations implement service management correctly, it's because it starts with understanding the fundamental problem. It's by going out and empathizing with users. Oh, you're having a lot of failures, you're having a lot of incidents and tickets. What can we do to solve that problem? How do we improve? How do we define, first of all, what the problem is so that we can actually put it into context so we can resolve it? So design thinking, human-centered design, is really about understanding. And I think ITSM professionals have a very good foundation because of all the years of going out and improving business services. The other thing that the IT service management professionals have going for them is their ability to ideate and prototype various solutions. So whether it's an event management solution or a ticketing system or an IVR for automated responses, these are things that can be developed very effectively by the ITSM folks through a process of ideating, prototyping, and sharing with the business what they've come up and resolved. So this whole concept of basically defining a problem, exploring a solution, and then ultimately materializing that solution right through to test and implementation. ITSM organizations have implemented an untold number of tools over the years, various systems for automating workflow, various systems for improving performance, reliability, for saving costs, for saving money. So when it comes to design thinking and human-centered design, ITSM folks have a real edge when it comes to these skill sets. The other thing that ITSM folks are very good at doing is the whole basically path from process design to the user stories and the requirements gathering. When you are building solutions, it all starts with a process, and ITSM folks are by nature quite process-centric, right? Process-focused. It's these business processes that are used to define what the outcomes the business is trying to achieve, and these processes that really drive or lay out a framework, if you will, for what needs to be automated. So those organizations who have been very successful in ITSM always take a look at what those processes are, not in isolation, not in a vacuum, but by meeting with the business, by meeting with the various stakeholders, laying these processes out, looking at what's working, what's not working, trying to refine those processes, and then using those processes to drive down the requirements for automation. There's been so many examples that I've seen in my career where folks will spend a lot of energy and time defining processes only to have those totally ignored by the folks who are implementing the tools. And when that happens, you end up getting solutions that aren't meeting the needs of the business. But good ITSM practitioners have this discipline that starts with understanding what the process is, and then using those processes to drive out the user stories, and to use those user stories to drive out the requirements, and then provide the business with, or I should say the development team, with a really clear path to solving the business problem. So process design, user story mapping, and requirements gathering is a real strength of IT service management organizations, at least the ones who do it effectively. And these same skills are just equally important whether you're building an incident management process or a change management process, because those really support, your current systems, the resiliency, the availability, the reliability. But it's equally important if you're developing new solutions, innovation. What is this new customer onboarding process going to look like? What's the online mortgage portal going to look like? What's the process that's followed from submitting an application for a mortgage all the way through to that being, fulfilled or approved? These processes, these skills can really help lay out the digital transformation program in clear, definable steps, turn those into requirements that ultimately will reduce the amount of thrashing and the amount of waste. Remember, 75% of digital transformation initiatives fail, but a technique like this can really help streamline the approach so that the solution actually has a good chance of meeting the business outcomes. Just to take this concept of process design, user story mapping, and requirements gathering a step further, there's an example that I like to share. It all starts with showing how a process can be decomposed down to the ultimate requirements. So rather than taking an IT service management process, I'll use the example of an expense management process, something that's not related to IT specifically. So let's say you have a very simple process, like the employee submits an expense form. The manager either decides to approve it or not based on the procedures or the policies, I should say. The manager will then ultimately submit that for payment, and the employee gets reimbursed. So this is where a disconnect often happens, right? So this is a pretty clear process, I think, to most people. But if I gave this process to 5 different developers, I would get 5 different solutions given back. And they may or may not meet the requirements that I was looking for. They might not meet the objectives that I set out. And why not? Because there's no clear direction on how this needs to be developed or how this needs to be implemented. The process is clear, but the implementation of that process in a workflow solution is not. The transformation of this from, let's say, a manual process to an automated process is not clear. That's where user stories come in. So if you're able to take the time and sit down and meet with the business for every step in the process and ask, what does a user need from the employee submits expense form piece? What does a manager need? What is, what do various stakeholders in the process need for each and every step? So for example, in this employee submits expense form, you might say, well, we need to have a process that conforms to accounting policies, and the employee must be able to submit a detailed expense form. So that says a little bit about what the requirement is, so there's probably going to have to be some checks in the process to make sure that the policies are being followed. We might have to have enough detail on the expense form to satisfy the finance department. So you're getting a little bit of the idea, and you can continue to do that as you build out the rest of the process. So now you've got a process, but you've also hearing from the users what they're looking for, what they need. And these can be all the various personas that take part in the process. the people who submit the expenses, the people who review and approve the expenses, and the folks that ultimately pay out the expenses. So everybody who is involved in this process, all the actors in this process, you can capture, detailed user stories for each and every step in the process. But I'll turn around and give this to a developer, and it still might not be enough because, well, what do the policies look like? What happens once they submit the form? I need a little more detail. And that's where technical requirements come in. And technical requirements allow you to provide, further color to the different steps in the process. So you can have a set of technical requirements that support the user stories, and these user stories support each step in the process. So now you've got something really clear here. I know exactly who my actors are in the process, what they're looking for from a requirements perspective, and all of the details I need to fulfill those requirements. And why is this important? Because this is going to save you a significant amount of time and money down the road. It might seem like a lot of work, and it is a lot of work. You've got to go meet with people, you've got to talk, you have to listen. Back to the design thinking, you got to empathize with people. Yeah, that is the way we do it today is hard. It's complex. I mean, we need to, we understand we need to improve this for you. So we're listening to make improvements. It's this process. It's combining the skills that ITSM people are familiar with and so good at that allows you to really empathize with your users, pull out the requirements based on the different actors or personas, and get those requirements that ultimately are going to allow you to beat the odds of being one of those 75% of digital transformation initiatives that end in failure. Because this is going to give a clear path. The homework has been done. You know what you're trying to do. You know where you're trying to go through the process. You know what the users need through the user stories. You're listening to the voice of the customer, and you know the requirements to fulfill it. And this isn't magic, or this isn't some novel idea. I mean, this is how it should be done, and how many people say it should be done. But so many people don't follow this. They basically ignore the process step. They go to the vendor who's selling the tool. They talk about implementing out of the box, which may or may not meet the needs of the business. So many things get in the way of doing this. It could be culture, it could be lack of sponsorship, lack of leadership. But as ITSM professionals, I think you all know this is kind of the right way and the right approach to do it. And sometimes it's worth speaking up and saying, no, pushing back. If we don't do this way, we have a big chance of being one of those 75% of initiatives that are going to end in failure. The ITSM can really help drive innovation and transformation. I just want to reiterate some of these key points. ITSM professionals have the necessary skills to drive digital transformation. You've been doing it for years and years. Whether you're doing that for an IT initiative like incident management, problem management, ServiceNow, or whether you're bringing those skills to bear on implementing a complex business solution, they're the same skills, they're totally transferable. And I submit that you might have some of the best skills in the entire organization. Following this kind of approach really can help improve the alignment between IT and the business, starting by listening to the needs of the business, by empathizing with what the business is trying to achieve. A good ITSM practitioner always has their antenna up, they always have their ears open, and they're listening to what those problems are, what the pain points are, and how they can improve them. And these are great skills to drive transformation and innovation. The creativity is also another thing that ITSM professionals can really bring to the table. They have the creativity of implementing these technical solutions for the, since the 60s. So there's a whole wealth of experience and knowledge and capability and practice and best practice all around how it needs to be done. And creative solutions can be accelerated through the application of those principles. I also think that ITSM and the discipline of ITSM can result in better requirements. through the mapping of the process and the gathering of the user stories. And ultimately, it's these requirements that are going to ensure that whatever is implemented is done on time, on budget, at the best possible cost. And going back to some of the drivers, right high up on the list, cost savings, automation. These are what the financial services industry is looking for in terms of their IT spend. These are the priorities. And the skill sets of the ITSM community can really help the financial services sector really achieve the outcomes they're desiring. I think you'll also end up with a lot happier customers because you're going to be listening to what their problems are. You're not going to be designing these solutions in a vacuum. And all too often, well, we just got to get this project done. We're going to implement out of the box. The vendor says this is the best way to do it. It's going to solve all our problems. And anyone who thinks, that any tool is going to be a silver bullet to solving a problem, well, I think you've probably been burnt once or twice in the past. You're going to have much happier citizens by going through a methodology that starts with listening to their needs and ultimately drives out all of the requirements and user stories to deliver a solution that really meets the needs of the business. And I think as an ITSM professional, you're well suited to do that. And ultimately, it's all about saving time, money, reducing waste. And following this method, by taking this approach, you're going to have a lot less rework. You're going to improve your productivity. You'll be able to deliver solutions faster, on budget, if not under budget, because you have clear direction, a great process, awesome requirements based on listening to customers through the user stories. So these are basically, I believe, the key ways that an ITSM organization can really help drive innovation and transformation. What I'd like to do now is just spend a couple of moments giving you a brief overview of the Navvia Process Designer and some of the ways that the technology in Navvia can be used to address the different issues or the different requirements that I outlined in today's presentation. Then what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll open it up for questions both on the presentation itself or any questions you might have on the Navvia Process Designer. So what I was talking about today, isn't academic. It was based on, a long career in the IT service management sector. And as a consulting company who was founded in 1999, a lot of experience working in organizations like the Bank of New York Mellon, the New York Stock Exchange, Charles Schwab. I mean, we worked with a lot of large, complex organizations. And we also got a chance to see the ones that, were successful and the ones that, that struggle. While doing that work, we were very passionate about taking, and I'm not talking about a waterfall approach here, but taking a process-led approach. Because we always believed right from the get-go that the best implementations started with understanding what it is you were trying to achieve, and nothing does that better than outlining the process. So we were always passionate about, by starting with the process and speaking to people, you had a better chance of delivering a successful implementation. So that was our passion right from the early days, right? And that was actually based on our team seeing so many failures out there who didn't take an approach like that. The other thing that was important is we fixed priced our work back when we were consultants. So we wanted to make sure we were able to do things on time and on budget because we did a fixed price engagement. And requirements and process mapping was the driver for us, basically being the most efficient and effective. So the Navvia Process Designer was born out of that. It was born out of the whole idea of improving productivity, improving requirements, improving implementations. There's a lot of features in Navvia, and I'm only going to spend five minutes or so here, just touching it at a very high level. But the one area where you want to focus on is the designer. And the designer is where most of the work I talked about today can get done. In the designer, you can actually bring in processes from a very rich library of ITIL, ServiceNow, COVID templates, and also a soon to be released library of business process templates around asset management, delivering physical products, services, business capabilities, human resources, each of these categories having a variety of starter templates. So why is a starter template point important? Because it's a straw model, if you will. It gives people something to focus on and to expand. Because if you start with a completely blank slate, well, you know, there can be a lot of back and forth just trying to get agreement. When you start with a straw model based on best practice, you have you're basically structuring the conversation and you're directing the conversation, and you can be much more effective and efficient. I'm not saying you implement process right off the straw model, because all organizations need to tweak it for their own needs, but Navvia provides a wealth of templates that can help get you started. It can really, you know, shorten that whole process design phase. So a lot of great templates in the Navvia tool. When you bring a template into Navvia, let's say the change management template, we've done the work of basically documenting out the process based on best practice. And this isn't like purely on ITIL or purely on any specific service management framework, but it's really a combination of what these frameworks offer, plus the detail that only comes from many, many years of actually doing the work. So we've taken basically, I'll just expand this a little bit. Oops. So we've created templates. Here's one for change management that actually walks you through the key activities of change management: raising a change, assessing a change, scheduling a change, building it out, review and closing the change. And for each of these activities in the process, we document out the specific set of tasks or the workflow. So this gives you a great starting point. And in real time, you know, you can modify these processes. You can move things around, you can add other tasks, you can add other activities, reorder things. And what Navvia is going to do is update all your documentation for you. So you don't have to actually manually build documents from this process. You just document the process like you would in Visio, capture some detailed information behind all of the tasks, like the description, the roles, the inputs, the outputs, any specific user stories. Here's an example of normal change form layout. Capture the user stories, and then Navvia will take this information and produce a variety of documents from it: user story documentation, requirements documentation, process documentation. They will take this documentation and ship it across an API into products like ServiceNow, so that you can leverage this in knowledge articles, create user stories in the Agile module of ServiceNow. So what this gives you is a structure and a framework. You capture all of the information, and then you can go in and easily produce either executive summaries, user story documentation, just the flowcharts, a complete process document. So for example, I have user stories here. Just hitting this create document is going to produce the documentation for you. So rather than going out to Word, we'll build the documents, table of contents, insert all the information right into the document. Here's our first user story, normal change form layout, and even go a step further and map all the fields that need to be on the change form to the user story. Very, very powerful tool. And from the same view, or so from the same process, I should say, you can get an executive summary of the process or a complete process document. So the Navvia Process Designer is a great way of following this methodology of starting with process, capturing user stories, mapping requirements, and then creating very comprehensive design packages which can be used to accelerate digital transformation, whether it's an ITSM process or a business process. All right, I'm just going to get back to the slide here, and I'll just open it up to any questions that anyone might have before we wrap up today's session. So do we have any questions or comments? Or
so far, we don't have any comments or questions.
So let me ask you folks.
Oh,
I do have a question here. Do
Yeah.
these templates also have the audit controls incorporated? Yeah, definitely. We have actually a very comprehensive. I'll show you a little bit of the data model here very quickly. For every process, I can turn this process into a mind map. So not only do we produce a document of the process, but you can see here we capture the goals, the objectives of the process. We capture roles. So every role and a description of the role. And all this appears in the process document, by the way, the inputs, the outputs, the controls, the metrics, the policies. So under controls, you can see it. We've actually mapped here COPIT controls to the process. So very, very much tied in. So I hope that helped. Oh, thank you, David. I appreciate the feedback. Any other questions? Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much. All right, it doesn't seem like there's any more questions at this point. So what I'm going to do is wrap things up. What we're going to do is we're going to send out a copy of the slides as well as the recording of today's presentation. You'll receive that in an email either later on this afternoon or tomorrow. If you're interested in learning more about the Navvia Process Designer, feel free to respond to the email and we'd be happy to set up a much more detailed demonstration for you or your team. But basically, Navvia will help you save time and money by taking the practices of process design, user story capture, requirements definition, and creating design packages which can be used to accelerate digital transformation in your organization. All right, I want to thank you all for attending today, and I wish you happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and hope to see you all soon. Bye for now.